Chapter 37. On the next day, which was Sunday, Deborah made an appointment with her father's physician, and had a long talk with him at his house. Upon her return, she went to her room and stayed there until evening, but when she came down to supper, her manner was as usual. At the table she joined in the talk of Edith and the children, already deep in their preparations for the move up to the farm. George could hardly wait to start. That life would be a change indeed in Edith's plans for her family, and as they talked about it now, the tension of hostility which had so long existed between the two sisters passed away. Each knew the clash had come to an end, that they would live together no more, and as though in remorse they drew close, Deborah with her suggestions, Edith in her friendly way of taking and discussing each one. Then Deborah went again to her room. Her room was just over Roger's, and waking several times in the night, he heard his daughter walking the floor. The next day she was up early and off to her school before he came down. It was a fine spring morning. Roger had had a good night's sleep, and as he walked to his office he was buoyed up by a feeling both of hope for his daughter and of solid satisfaction in himself as he remembered all that he had said to her. Curiously enough, he could recall every word of it now. Every point which he had made rose up before him vividly. How clear he had been, how simple and true, and yet with what a tremendous effect he had piled the points on one another. By George, he thought with a little glow, for a fellow who's never been in a pulpit, I put up a devilish strong appeal. And he added sagely, let it work on the girl, give it a chance. She'll come out of this all right. This idea some fellows have that every woman is born a fool isn't fair, it isn't true. Just let a line of argument be presented to her strong and clear, straight from the shoulder, by some man. And again, with a tingle of pleasure, his mind recurred to his sermon. His pleasures had been few of late, so he dwelt on this little glow of pride and made the most of it while it was here. At the office, as he entered his room, he stopped with a slight shock of surprise. John, standing on his crutches in front of a large table, had been going through the morning's mail, sorting out the routine letters Roger did not need to see. Today he had just finished and was staring at the window. The light fell full on his sallow face and showed an amazing happiness. At Roger's step he started. Well, Johnny, how goes it this morning? Fine, thank you, was the prompt reply, and John hobbled briskly over to his typewriter in the corner. Roger sat down at his desk. As he did so, he glanced again at the cripple and felt a little pang of regret. What will become of him, he asked, when I close out my business? He still thought of him as a mere boy. For looking at the small, crooked form, it was difficult to remember that John was 20 years of age. The lad had worked like a Trojan of late. Even Roger, engrossed as he had been in family anxieties, had noticed it in the last few weeks. He would have to make some provision for John. Deborah would see to it. Roger went slowly through his mail. One letter was from the real estate firm through whom he was to sell the house. The deal had not been closed as yet. There were certain points still to be settled. So Roger called John to his desk and dictated a reply. When he finished, there was a brief pause. That's all, said Roger gruffly. So you're selling the house, John ventured. Yes. The lad limped back to his corner and went to work at his machine, but presently he came over again and stood waiting awkwardly. What is it, Johnny? Roger inquired without looking up. Say, Mr. Gale, the boy began in a carefully casual tone, would you mind talking business a minute or two? No, fire ahead. Well, sir, you've had your own troubles lately. You haven't had much time for things here. The last time you went over the books was nearly a couple of weeks ago. John paused, and his look was portentous. Well, asked Roger, what about it? Business been picking up any since then? Yes, sir, was the answer. We didn't lose a cent last week. We made money, $15. Good Lord, Johnny, we're getting rich. But that's nothing, John continued. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Gale, I've been working lately on a new line I thought of, and now it's got a going so fast it's getting clean away from me." Again he stopped and swallowed hard. "Out with it, then," said Roger. "I got it from the war," said John. "The papers are still half full of war news, and that's what's keeping our business down, because we ain't adopting ourselves to the new war conditions. So I figured it like this. Say there are 1 million people over here in America who have got either friends or relations in the armies over there. Say that all of them want to get news, not just this stuff about battles, but real live news of what's happened to Bill. Has Bill still got his legs and arms? Can he hold down a job when he gets home? News which counts for something. See? A big new market. Business for us. So I tried to see what I could do." John excitedly shifted his crutches. Roger was watching intently. "Go on, Johnny." "Sure, I'll go on. One night I went to a library where they have English papers. I went over their files for about a month. I took one Canadian regiment, see, and traced it through, and I got quite a story. Then I used some of the money I'd saved and bought a whole bunch of papers. I piled 'em up in the room where I sleep and went through 'em nights. I hired 2 kids to help me. Well, Mr. Gale, the thing worked fine. In less than a week I had any amount of little bunches of clippings. See how I mean? Each bunch was the story of one regiment for a month, so I knew we could deliver the goods. Well, this was about 10 days ago, and then I went after the market. I went to a man I met last year at an advertising office, and for $50 we put an ad in the Sunday Times. After that there was nothing to do but wait. The next day, nothing doing. I was here at 7:30 and I went through every mail. Not a single answer to my ad, and I thought I was busted. But Tuesday morning there were 3 with $5 checks inside of them. In the afternoon there were 2 more, and the next day 11. By the end of last week we'd had 46. Friday I put in another ad, and there have been over 70 more since then. That makes 120 in all, $600, and I'm swamped. I ain't done nothing yet. I've just kept 'em all for you to see." He went quickly to the table, gathered a pile of letters there, and brought them over to Roger's desk. Roger glanced over a few of them, dazed. He looked around at John's shrewd face, where mingled devotion and triumph and business zeal were shining. "Johnny," he said huskily, "you've adopted my business, and no mistake." John swallowed again and scowled with joy. "Let's figure it out," he proposed. "We will." They were at it all day, laying their plans, adopting the work of the office to the new conditions. They found they would need a larger force, including a French and a German translator. They placed other ads in the paper. They forgot to have lunch and worked steadily on till the outer rooms were empty and still. At last they were through. Roger wearily put on his cuffs and went and got his coat and hat. "Say, Mr. Gale," John asked him, "how about this letter, the one you dictated this morning to that firm about your house?" Roger turned and looked at him. "Throw it into the basket," he said. "We'll write 'em another tomorrow and tell 'em we have changed our minds." He paused for just a moment, and then he added brusquely, "If this goes through as I hope it will, I guess you'd better come into the firm." And he left the room abruptly. Behind him there was not a sound. At home in his study that evening he made some more calculations. In a few weeks he would have money enough to start Edith and her family in their new life on the farm. For the present, at least, the house was safe. "Why, Father," Edith came into the room, "I didn't know you had come home. What kept you so long at the office?" "Oh, business, my dear." "Have you had any supper?" "No, and I'd like some," he replied. "I'll see to it myself," she said. Edith was good at this sort of thing, and the supper she brought was delicious. He ate it with keen relish. Then he went back to his study and picked up a book, an old favorite. He started to read, but presently dozed. The book dropped from his hands, and he fell asleep. He awakened with a start and saw Deborah looking down at him. For a moment he stared up as he came to his senses, and in his daughter's clear gray eyes he thought he saw a happiness which set his heart to beating fast. Well, he questioned huskily. We're to be married right away. He stared a moment longer. Oh, I'm so glad, my dear. I was afraid you. He stopped short. Deborah bent close to him, and he felt her squeeze his arm. I've been over and over all you said, she told him in a low, sweet voice. I had a good many ups and downs, but I'm all through now. I'm sure you were right. She pressed her cheek to his. Oh, Dad, it's such a relief. And I'm so happy. Thank you, dear. Where is Alan? He asked presently. I'll get him, she said. She left the room, and in a moment Alan's tall, ungainly form appeared in the doorway. Well, Alan, my boy, Roger cried. Oh, Roger Gale, said Alan softly. He was wringing Roger's hand. So she decided to risk you, huh? Roger said unsteadily. Well, Baird, you look like a devilish risk for a woman like her, who has the whole world on her back as it is. Oh, I know how rash she has been. Only 2 years and her mind was made up. But that's like her. That's our Deborah, always acting like a flash. Stop acting like children, Deborah cried, and be sensible and listen to me. We're to be married tomorrow morning. Why tomorrow? Roger asked. Because, she said decidedly, there has been enough fuss over this affair, so we'll just be married and have it done. And when Edith and the children go up next week to the mountains, we want to move right into this house. This house? Exclaimed her father. I know, it's sold, she answered, but we're going to get a lease. We'll see the new owner and talk him around. Then you'll have to talk your father around. You around? And Deborah stared. You mean to say you're not going to sell? I do, said Roger blithely. He told them the story of John's new scheme. And if things turn out in the office as I hope they will, he ended, we'll clear the mortgage on the house and then make it your wedding gift, from the new firm to the new family. Deborah choked a little. Alan, what do you think of us now? I think, he answered in a drawl, that we'd better try to persuade the new firm to live with the new family. We will, and the sooner the better, she said. I'm going up to the mountains, said Roger. Yes, but you're coming back in the fall, and when you do, you're coming here, and you're going to live here years and years. You're forgetting my doctor. Not at all. I had a long talk with him Sunday, and I know just what I'm saying. You don't look it, my dear, said Roger, but of course you may be right. If you take the proper care of me here, and John keeps booming things for the firm, and George makes a huge success of the farm, Deborah added quickly, and Deborah of teaching the world. Oh, Alan, hush up. Look here, he said. You go upstairs and tell Edith all this. Your father and I want to be alone. When the two men were left alone, they smoked and said nothing. They smiled at each other. It's hard to decide, grunted Roger at last. Which did it? My wonderful sermon or your own long waiting game? I'm inclined to think it was the game. For any other man but you, with all you've done, without any talk, no, sir, there wouldn't have been a chance. For she's modern, Baird, she's modern. And I'm going to live just as long as I can. I want to see what happens here. The next night in his study, how quiet it was. Edith was busy packing upstairs. Deborah and Alan were gone. Thoughts drifted slowly across his mind. Well, she was married, the last of his daughters, the one whom he cared most for, the one who had taken the heaviest risks. And this was the greatest risk of all, for although she had put it happily out of her thoughts for the moment, Roger knew the old troublesome question was still there in Deborah's mind. The tenement children or her own, the big family or the small. He felt there would still be struggles ahead, and with a kind of a wistfulness he tried to see into the future here. He gave a sudden start in his chair. By George, he thought, they forgot the ring. Scowling, he tried to remember. Yes, in the brief, simple service that day in which so much had been omitted, music, flowers, wedding gown, even the ring had been left out. Why? Not from any principle. He knew that they were not such fools. No, they had simply forgotten it in the haste of getting married at once. Well, by thunder, for a girl whose father had been a collector of rings for the best part of his natural life, it was pretty shabby to say the least. Then he recollected that he too had forgotten it, and this quieted him immediately. I'll get one, though, he promised himself, and no plain wedding ring either. I'll make A. Bear to tend to that. No, I'll get her a ring worthwhile. He sank deep in his chair and took peace to his soul by thinking of the ring he would choose, and this carried his thoughts back over the years, for there had been so many rings. Chapter 38. It was a clear, beautiful afternoon toward the end of May, and as the train, puffing up the grade, wound along the Connecticut River, Roger sat looking out of the window. The orchards were pink and white on the hills. Slowly the day wore away. The river narrowed, the hills reared high, and in the sloping meadows gray ribs and shoulders of granite appeared. The air had a tang of the mountains. Everywhere were signs of spring, of new vigor and fresh life. But the voices at each station sounded drowsier than at the last. The eyes appeared more stolid, and to Roger it felt like a journey far back into old ways of living, old beliefs and old ideals. He had always had this feeling, and always he had relished it, this dive into his boyhood. But it was different today, for this was more than a journey. It was a migration, too. Close about him in the car were Edith and her children, bound for a new home up there in the very heart and stronghold of all old things in America. Old things dear to Edith's heart. As she sat by the window staring out, he watched her shapely little head. He noted the hardening lines on her forehead and the gray which had come in her hair. It had been no easy move for her, this. She'd shown pluck to take it so quietly. He saw her smile a little, then frown, and go on with her thinking. What was she thinking about, he wondered? All she had left behind in New York, or the rest of her life which lay ahead? She had always longed for things simple and old. Well, she would have them now with a vengeance, summer and winter, the year round, in a battered frame house on the mountainside, the birthplace of her family. A recollection came to him of a summer's dusk 2 years ago, and a woman with a lawnmower cutting the grass on the family graves. Would Edith ever be like that, a mere custodian of the past? If she did, he thought, she would be false to the very traditions she tried to preserve, for her forefathers had never been mere guardians of things gone by. Always they had been pioneers. That house had not been old to them, but a thrilling new adventure. Their old homes they had left behind, far down in the valleys to the east, and even those valley homes had been new to the rugged men come over the sea. Would Edith ever understand? Would she see that for herself the new must emerge from her children, from the ideas, desires, and plans already teeming in their minds? Would she show keen interest, sympathy? Would she be able to keep her hold? In the seat behind her mother, Betsy was sitting with Bruce in her lap, looking over a picture book. Quietly, Roger watched the girl. "What are you going to be?" he asked. "A woman's college president, a surgeon, or a senator? And what will your mother think of you then?" They changed cars, and on a train made up of antiquated coaches they wound through a side valley, down which, rushing and tumbling, came the river that bore Roger's name. He went into the smoking car, and presently George joined him there. George did not yet smoke, with his elders, but he had bought a package of gum, and he was chewing absorbedly. Plainly the lad was excited over the great existence which he saw opening close ahead. Roger glanced at the boy's broad shoulders, noticed the eager lines of his jaw, looked down at his enormous hands, unformed as yet, ungainly, but in them was a hungriness that caused a glow in Roger's breast. One more of the family starting out. "It's all going to depend on you," Roger gravely counseled. "Your whole life will depend on the start you make. Either you're going to settle down, like so many of your neighbors up there, Or you're going to hustle, plan out your day, keep on with your studies, and go to college. The state agricultural college, I mean. In short, keep up to date, my boy, and become in time a big figure in farming. I'm going to do it, George replied. His grandfather glanced again at his face, so scowling, so determined, and a gleam of compassion and yearning came for a moment in Roger's eyes. His heavy hand lay on George's knee. "That's right, son," he grunted. "Make the family proud of you. I'll do all I can to help you start. My business is picking up, thank God, and I'll be able to back you now. I'll stay up here a good part of the summer. We've both of us got a lot to learn, and not only from books. We want to remember we've plenty to learn from the neighbors, too. Take old Dave Royce, for instance, who, when all is said and done, has worked our farm for 20-odd years and never once run me into debt." "But gee," demurred George, "he's so way out of date." "I know he is, son, but we've got to go slow." And Roger's look passed furtively along the faces in the car. "We don't want to forget," he warned, "that this is still New England. Every new idea we have, we want to go easy with, snake it in." "I've got an awful lot of 'em," the boy muttered hungrily. At the farm, the next morning at daybreak, Roger was awakened by the sound of George's voice. It was just beneath his window. "But cattle are only part of it, Dave," the boy declared in earnest tones. "Just part of what we can have up here. Think what we've got. Over 300 acres, and we want to make every acre count. We want to get in a whole lot more of hogs, belted Hampshires if we can afford 'em, and a couple of hundred hens. White Leghorns ought to fill the bill. Of course, that's just a starter. I've got a scheme for some incubators, electric, run by the dynamo, which we'll put in down by the dam. And we can do wonders with bees, too, Dave. I've got a book on 'em I'd like you to read. And besides, there's big money in squab these days. Rich women in New York hotels eat thousands of 'em every night. And ducks, of course, and turkeys. I'd like a white gobbler right at the start, if we knew where we could get one cheap." The voice broke off, and there was a pause. "We can do an awful lot with this place." Then Dave's deep drawl. "That's so, George. Yes, I guess that's so. Only we don't want to fool ourselves. That ain't Noah's Ark over there. It's a barn. And just for a starter, if I was you—" Here Dave deliberated. "Of course, it's none of my business," he said. "It's for you and your grandfather to decide. And I don't propose to interfere in what ain't any of my affair." Yes, Dave, sure, that's all right. But go on. What, just for a starter?" "Cows," came the tranquil answer. "I've been hunting around since you rut me last month, and I know of 3 good milkers." "3? Why, Dave, I wrote we want 30 or 40. "Yes, you wrote," Dave answered, "but I've druv all round these parts, and there ain't but 3 that I can find, and I ain't so sure of that third one. She looks like she might—" George cut in. "But you only have a buggy, Dave. Gee, I'm going to have a Ford." "That's so, George?" "You bet it's so, and we'll go on a cow hunt all over the state." "Well, I don't know but what you're right," Dave responded cautiously. "You might get more cows if you had a Ford, and got so you could run it. Yes, I guess it's a pretty good scheme. I believe in being conservative, George, but I don't know now what but a Ford—" Their voices passed from under the window, and Roger relaxed and smiled to himself. It was a good beginning, he thought. They bought a Ford soon afterwards, and in the next few weeks of June they searched the farms for miles around, slowly adding to their herd. To Roger's surprise, he found many signs of a new life stirring there. The farmers buying autos and improved machinery, thinking of new processes, and down in the lower valleys they found several big stock farms which were decidedly modern affairs. At one such place the man in charge took a fancy to George and asked him to drop over often. "You bet I'll drop over often," George replied, as he climbed excitedly into his Ford. "I want to see more of those milking machines. We're going to have 'em some day ourselves, a dynamo, too." and at home, down by the ruined mill, he set again about rebuilding the dam. Roger felt himself growing stronger. His sleeps were sound, and his appetite had come back to a surprising degree. The mountain air had got into his blood, and George's warm vigor into his soul. One afternoon, watching the herd come home, some 30 huge animals swinging along with a slow, heavy power in their limbs, he breathed the strong, sweet scent of them on the mountain breeze. George came running by them and stopped a moment by Roger's side, watching closely and eagerly every animal as it passed, and Roger glanced at George's face. The herd passed on, and George followed behind, his collie dog leaping and barking beside him. And Roger looked up at a billowy cloud resting on a mountain top and wondered whether, after all, that New York doctor had been right. He followed the herd into the barn. In 2 long rows, the great heads of the cattle turned hungrily, lowing and sniffing deep, breathing harshly, stamping as the fodder cart came down the lines. What a splendidly wholesome work for a lad, growing up here with roots in the soil, in these massive, simple forces of life. What of Edith's other children? Would they be willing to stay here long? Each morning Roger breakfasted with Bruce, the baby, by his side. What a thing for you, little lad, he thought, if you could live here all your days. But will you? Will you want to stay? Won't you too get the fever as I did for the city? In the joyous, shining, mysterious eyes of the baby he found no reply. He had many long talks with Betsy, who was eager to go away to school, and with Bob and little Tad, who were going to school in the village that fall, and the feeling came to Roger that surely he would see these lives, at least, for many years ahead. They were so familiar and so real, so fresh and filled with hopes and dreams, and he felt himself so a part of them all. But one morning, climbing the steep upper field to a spring George wanted to show him, Roger suddenly swayed, turned faint. He caught hold of a boulder on the wall and held himself rigid, breathing hard. It passed, and he looked at his grandson, but George had noticed nothing. The boy had turned, and his brown eyes were fixed on the fallow field below. Wistfully, Roger watched his face. They both stood motionless for a long time. As the summer drew slowly to a close, Roger spent many quiet hours alone by the copse of birches, where the glory of autumn was already stealing in and out among the tall, slender stems of the trees, and he thought of the silent winter there, and of the spring which would come again, and the long, fragrant summer. And he watched the glow on the mountains above and the rolling splendors of the clouds. At dusk he heard the voices of animals, birds and insects, murmuring up from all the broad valley, then gradually sinking to deep repose, many never to wake again. And the span of his life, from the boyhood which he could recall so vividly here among these children, seemed brief to him as a summer's day, only a part of a mighty whole made up of the innumerable lives, the many generations of his family, his own flesh and blood, come out of a past he could never know, and going on without him now, branching, dividing, widening out to what his eyes would never see. Vaguely he pictured them groping their way, just as he himself had done. It seemed to Roger that all his days he had been only entering life, as some rich, bewildering thicket like this copse of birches here, never getting very deep, never seeing very clearly, never understanding all. And so it had been with his children, and so it was with these children of Edith's, and so it would be with those many others, always groping, blundering, starting. Children, only children, all. And yet what lives they were to lead, what joys and revelations and disasters would be theirs, in the strange remote world they would live in, my flesh and blood that I never shall know. But the stars were quiet and serene. The meadows and the forests on the broad sweep of the mountainside took on still brighter, warmer hues, and there was no gloom in these long goodbyes. On a frosty night in September he left the farm to go to the city. From his seat in the small automobile, Roger looked back at the pleasant old house with its brightly lighted windows, and then he turned to George by his side. "We're in good shape for the winter, son." But George did not get his full meaning. At the little station there were no other passengers. They walked the platform for some time. Then the train, with a scream, came around the curve. A quick grip on George's hand, and Roger climbed into the car. Inside, a moment later, he looked out through the window. By a trainman with a lantern, George stood watching, smiling up, and he waved his hand as the train pulled out.